There is a particular kind of pain that does not announce itself loudly. It does not arrive with betrayal so obvious you can name it, or cruelty so visible that others around you can confirm what you already know. It arrives quietly, in the space between what someone says and how they say it, in the way a room shifts when you walk in the slow accumulation of moments where you left a conversation smaller than when you entered it and could not explain why. This is the pain that most people never examine, because examining it would require them to look at something they are not yet ready to see. You have been told that love is supposed to feel like belonging, that the people who care for you will lift you, expand you, make you feel more like yourself, not less. And yet there are people in your life right now, people you may have named as your closest, who have a consistent and undeniable effect on you. You feel watched rather than seen. You feel managed rather than understood. You shrink, not because you are weak, but because something in the relationship has been structured, consciously or not, to keep you small. And the cruelest part of this structure is that it has been dressed in the language of love so completely that you have been defending it. Friedrich Nietzsche spent his life studying the architecture of human relationships, not the surface narratives people construct about why they do what they do, but the underlying forces, the power dynamics, the ways in which care and control become indistinguishable from the outside. He was not a cynic. He was a diagnostician. And what he observed, again and again, across the full sweep of human history and human intimacy, was this: people rarely destroy each other with hatred. They do it with love that was never really about the other person at all. These 7 rules are not instructions for becoming harder. They are tools for becoming clearer. They will not teach you to stop caring. They will teach you to see the difference between love that serves your life and attachment that slowly excavates it. The first rule is this: never mistake the narrative for the truth. Perception governs reality, not the facts alone, but the story told about the facts. Nietzsche understood that the most dangerous position a person can occupy is one of moral innocence without philosophical awareness. There is a belief deeply embedded in people who mean well that truth will always eventually surface, that goodness will be recognized, that if you simply are what you are, with no performance and no strategy, the world will eventually render an accurate verdict. History is full of individuals who believed this. History is also full of evidence that it is not how power actually operates. The person who loves you in ways that make you feel small has a story they tell about it. They are protecting you. They are being honest with you. They are the only one brave enough to tell you the truth about yourself. And because this story is delivered with the intimacy of someone who knows you, someone who has access to your history, your fears, your softest places, it lands with an authority that a stranger's cruelty never could. Nietzsche wrote that those who cannot distinguish between the will to truth and the will to power will always be governed by those who can. The first rule, then, is not paranoia. It is discernment. Ask not only what is being said, but what effect the saying of it serves. The person who loves you and the person who benefits from keeping you uncertain about yourself can look identical for a very long time. The second rule: control what you reveal, not what you feel. There is a particular pressure in intimate relationships toward total transparency. the idea that full emotional disclosure is the ultimate proof of trust. And trust, in genuine relationships, does require vulnerability. But Nietzsche observed something that most people in these conversations refuse to examine. Emotional transparency in a relationship that has not established genuine psychological safety is not intimacy. It is exposure. And exposure, in the wrong hands, does not deepen connection. It creates leverage. The person who consistently makes you feel small is rarely unaware of where your soft places are. They know because you showed them. They know because you told them. In moments when you believed the information was being received with care, that you need reassurance about your intelligence, or your worth, or your likability. And in a relationship that is genuinely loving, this knowledge is held with tenderness. In a relationship that operates through quiet control, this knowledge becomes the architecture of every conversation that leaves you depleted. You are not required to become closed. You are required to become selective. The second rule is not about coldness. It is about understanding that the map of your vulnerabilities should only ever be handed to people who have demonstrated, not merely claimed, that they will protect what you give them. The third rule: never respond to deliberate harm as though it were accidental confusion. This one is the hardest, because the people who diminish us most effectively are rarely the ones who attack openly. They are the ones who hurt us, and then look confused when we name it, who say they were only joking, who say we are too sensitive, who say they were trying to help. Nietzsche understood that the weak response to deliberate harm does not communicate forgiveness. It communicates permission. Each time you absorb a calculated wound and return warmth, you are not demonstrating your capacity for love. You are demonstrating that the behavior will not have consequences. And behavior without consequences does not improve. It escalates. This is not a call to retaliation. It is a call to accuracy. The third rule requires that you become precise in distinguishing between the person who stumbled and the person who aimed. And when you determine that the harm was aimed, however gently, however it was dressed, that you respond with calibrated clarity rather than gracious silence. Not cruelty. Clarity. These are not the same thing, though the person who benefits from your silence will work very hard to convince you they are. The fourth rule: never reveal the full extent of your strength before you have established your position. There is an instinct in people who feel underestimated, particularly people in relationships where their worth has been quietly questioned, to prove themselves, to demonstrate capability, to show all that they are in a single moment, hoping that visibility will finally produce the recognition they have been denied. Nietzsche observed that this instinct, however understandable, is strategically catastrophic. Visibility creates targets before you have created protection. And in a relationship where your worth has been subject to management, where the other person has, consciously or not, required you to be slightly less than them in order to feel safe, your full emergence will not be celebrated. It will be destabilized. The fourth rule is patience of a particular and demanding kind. It is not suppression. It is timing. It is the understanding that every strength you demonstrate before you have secured your own independence is a strength that can be borrowed against, subtly discouraged, or quietly undermined by someone who needs you to stay within a manageable range. Build in private before you build in public. Prove things to yourself before you prove them to those who have reasons not to believe. The fifth rule: understand that respect and affection are constructed differently, and that one does not automatically produce the other. This distinction is perhaps the most uncomfortable of all the things Nietzsche observed about human relationships. We want them to be the same. We want the person who loves us to also respect us, to hold our judgment as reliable, our choices as considered, our instincts as trustworthy. But love, in its most common form, is not structured this way. Love, as most people experience it, is an attachment that exists alongside whatever else is true about you. Respect is a structural assessment. It has to be maintained, demonstrated, re-established when it erodes. The person who makes you feel small often does love you. That is the part no one wants to say out loud. They love you in the way that is compatible with finding your ambitions slightly unrealistic. They love you in the way that is compatible with being surprised when you succeed. The love is real, and the love is not sufficient, because what you need, what every person requires in a relationship that sustains rather than diminishes them, is not someone who feels warmly toward you despite their reservations. It is someone whose estimation of your capacity is accurate, who respects not the version of you they are comfortable with, but the version of you that is actually there. Affection can coexist with condescension. Love and contempt are not always opposites. The fifth rule asks you to stop measuring a relationship only by the warmth it generates, and to begin measuring it also by the accuracy with which the other person sees you. Here is where it is worth pausing, because by now something in this may have started to feel dangerous, as though following these rules means becoming calculating, suspicious, armored against the very closeness that makes human life bearable. This is the resistance that Nietzsche himself anticipated, and it is worth addressing directly. He was not writing to create strategists. He was not building a case for solitude or for the surrender of tenderness. He was writing, and has always been writing, for those who possessed genuine goodness, real warmth, authentic capacity for love, but who had been convinced by painful experience that these qualities were the source of their suffering. They are not. The source of the suffering is not the warmth. It is the absence of discernment. It is goodness without sight, generosity without structure, love without the philosophical intelligence to distinguish between the relationship that expands your life and the one that quietly excavates it. These rules do not ask you to stop loving. They ask you to love with your eyes fully open. That is not a loss of innocence. That is the arrival of genuine maturity. The sixth rule: never fight every battle yourself when elevation accomplishes what confrontation cannot. Nietzsche studied power not as brute force, but as the art of leverage. The capacity to change your situation, not by defeating what opposes you, but by becoming something that opposition can no longer contain. In a relationship that has diminished you, the instinct is often to fight for recognition on the terms the relationship has already established. To argue your case inside the courtroom that was built to produce a particular verdict. But the sixth rule asks a different question entirely. Not how do I win this argument, but what would I become if I simply stopped seeking my worth from this source? The person who has been making you feel small for a long time has a profound investment in your continued smallness. Not because they are villains, because your expansion, in the terms of the relationship's current structure, is disruptive. The most powerful thing you can do in the face of this is not to argue. It is to grow in directions the relationship cannot follow, to build the evidence of your own worth somewhere outside the jurisdiction of their approval. This is not abandonment. It is the redirection of energy. And it is the only strategy that history has ever shown to be permanently effective. The seventh rule, and the one that contains all the others, is this: master your emotional center, because the ultimate defense is what others can no longer do to you. Nietzsche's highest concept of human achievement was not power over others. It was sovereignty over oneself. The person who has been made to feel small over a long period of time has given something over, a part of their internal stability that now lives outside themselves, in the hands of another person's assessment. They wait for approval before feeling settled. They feel reduced by criticism that was never even accurate. They have, in some real sense, handed their nervous system to someone else to operate. The seventh rule is the process of reclaiming it. Not through aggression, not through the dramatic confrontation that feels momentarily satisfying and changes nothing structural, through the slow, deliberate, sometimes tedious work of rebuilding the internal reference point, reconnecting with the evidence of your own capacity, choosing day by day to act in accordance with your own judgment, rather than the verdict rendered by someone who has always seen you through the particular lens their own fears required. This is not a fast transformation. It is the most important one. Because here is what actually changes when a person completes this work. They do not become cold. They do not become distant or tactical or stripped of warmth. They become, for the first time, genuinely free to love. Because love that comes from fullness, from a person who is not dependent on the relationship for their basic sense of worth, is a different thing entirely from love that comes from need. It is chosen rather than compelled. It is given rather than leaked. And it is, paradoxically, far more powerful than the desperate attachment that masquerades as devotion in relationships built on quiet diminishment. The manipulation that once confused you becomes legible. The comment designed to introduce doubt is just a comment now. You can see its architecture, trace its purpose, and choose not to be governed by it. The criticism that once kept you awake, reconstructing your sense of self, becomes information to be evaluated rather than a verdict to be absorbed. The tactics that once affected you have not changed. You have changed. And that is the distinction Nietzsche was pointing toward across his entire body of work. He was not writing a manual for predators. He was writing a map for those who had been navigating without one. He was saying, with the particular calm of someone who has looked at human nature for a very long time and refused to look away, you are not broken because you have been affected by this. You are not foolish because you believed what was presented to you as love. But the world you are actually living in operates on different terms than the world you were told about. And refusing to learn those terms does not make you more loving. It makes you more available to be consumed by those who already know them. Stop calling it love when it consistently makes you feel small. Not because it isn't love, but because love that does not create the conditions for your expansion is love that has been converted into something else, something that serves the needs of the person, giving it far more than it serves yours. The relationship you deserve is not the one where you are grateful to be included. It is the one where your presence is understood to be something the other person is fortunate to receive. That is not arrogance. That is what Nietzsche meant by self-mastery, not the belief that you are better than others, the refusal to believe that you are worth less. You do not finish this understanding armed for war. You finish it clearer, quieter, with the particular stillness of someone who has stopped being surprised by human nature and started moving through it with both eyes open. The people around you have not changed. The tactics have not disappeared. But you have developed something they cannot take from you now, the capacity to see. And once that capacity is developed fully, no one can diminish you without your permission again. That is not a small thing. That is everything.